Most of the time when you hear people explicating this text, they point out that the hermit is like the priest. He's a good, godly man. That's true. He is. He represents conventional religion and goodliness and godliness. But notice a couple things about him. First, he lives in the wood, and he comes down to the sea occasionally and talks with the mariners. It's sort of a convivial thing he does. He talks with them and shares a couple beers with them, and they laugh with delightful tales, but he never goes out on the sea. The hermit has not traveled into those realms, into those dark and nebulous realms of the ocean. He's never delved into that dark world of the human heart. Notice also his living in the woods, rather bucolic, rather nice, but he has a cushion, plump, that he sits on. It's a small detail, but it's a detail of luxury in the midst of what should otherwise be deprivation. It's almost like he's not a real hermit. He's play acting at being a hermit. He has a nice cushion to keep his tush comfortable while he sits on all those hard stumps and hard stools, and doesn't ever let himself fully indulge in the deprivation and awfulness that human life can get to. This is not a priest who has lived through war. It's not a priest that has lived through a concentration camp. He's not a man who has experienced great loss and deprivation. He's merely a functionary, somebody who is emblematic of the church as an everyday common experience rather than a church that ministers to people in great pain. Consequently, when they get closer to the ship, the pilot and the pilot's boy both notice something's wrong. This ship is odd. This is weird. And the hermit's like, no, go on, keep going. He's very cheerful and he's saying, it's just another ship. We'll go out to it. And even when they're noticing what's odd in this ship, the hermit says, well, all those things look like things in my forest. I've seen those things in forest. They're like leaves in my forest, right? They're like ivy in my forest. All the things around him are things that are comfortable and nice and bucolic, almost like a lovely painting, a nice painting of the outdoors. But even in his description, he describes the owlet whoops to the wolf below that eats the she-wolf's young. What, the owlet eats the she-wolf's young, or the wolf eats the she-wolf's young? There's a nuance even in his own description that he doesn't recognize. There's a violence to life and a terror to life and almost an intimation of cannibalism of the wolf eating her own young that the hermit doesn't see as problematic. He doesn't see anything horrible about it. Like the person that wears a cross around their neck and never thinks about the fact that they're wearing an instrument of torture around their neck. Like the person who goes to Mass and stands up and sits down and crosses himself and gets some bread and goes home, texting whenever they don't have to cross themselves during Mass, as though somehow this is not a big deal. And Coleridge seems to suggest that what the mariner has gone through is a very big deal. So big a deal that when he gets back home, the priest can't shrieve him. He's about to get off the boat, and he's so excited to get off the boat and get to the priest and the pilot and get back to normalcy. And all of a sudden, here comes this spirit that's been propelling the ship. And that spirit's not going to let him go so easily. And that spirit comes up and it breaks the ship in two. And down the ship goes in this maelstrom, this whirl that sucks it down into the ocean. And the sound of that cracking open redounds off of the hills around, and this tremendous sound of thunder that causes this almost apocalyptic ending to the ship. It's almost as though the world itself is cracked in two and is sucked down at the end, and the mariner barely gets off alive. They pull him onto the boat, and the pilot is terrified. He's so frightened that he jumps into the ocean. And the pilot's boy just goes nuts and starts just laughing maniacally in the boat, and the priest himself is in total fear of this guy. And notice all of them are terrified, not just by his appearance, which is scary enough, but the minute he tries to speak, there's a power to his voice which is terrifying to the people around him. And when they finally get to firm land and they step off, the hermit is so scared by what he's seen that he can hardly stand up straight. And the mariner says immediately, please, shrieve me of my sins, as though that's somehow going to help. But the hermit says, no, you tell me who you are first. The hermit crossed his brow, notice in a play on words, was like crossbow, but he crosses his brow, see. And that again is like a reminder to the mariner of what he has done. And so when the priest says, "You tell me who you are," the mariner is suddenly filled with this pain, a woeful agony, and it forces him to tell his story for the first time. How did I get to be who I am? And he tells the priest the whole story. And he says, since then, I tell it to everybody whenever I have this agony come on me. I pass from land to land like a prophet. It's like something in the Acts of the Apostles or something. I'm passing from land to land to tell people of my woeful story of death and salvation and resurrection. And he says, what was that sound? The wedding sounds like it's over. I'm sorry to have kept you so long, right? But I like to go to the church. I like to pray with everybody else, with a goodly company, he says. I love holiness and religious things like I never did before. But mostly I have to go and tell my story to the next person and the next person. But I leave you with this final message. Whoever prays well also is the person who loves well, both man and bird and beast. The person who loves the world is the person who really prays well. Praying is not, and holiness is not simply rote memory. It's not just simply a series of actions or a formula or an equation that we do only on Sunday. Coleridge seems to suggest that praying itself emerges out from a grateful heart, from somebody who has experienced loss and terror and suffering, come through it, and now recognizes that there is this symphony around them that they have to be grateful for. And it's with that last message that he passes on into the night. And it says he's just gone. He disappears. And that poor wedding guest, we have to factor him into this story. This poor kid who starts off as just a starry-eyed teenager who wants what every other teenager wants, to go off and be with the pretty girls and drink some booze and have a good time. And at the end of this story, he's like been hit with a hammer. It's like he can't walk away from so horrible and awful a story and be the same man anymore. But I would hazard at the end of the story, what Coleridge is suggesting is that he's not walking away the same man, he's walking away as a man. Because a man deals with stories like this. A man can't be frivolous in the face of horror. A man can't be frivolous in the face of sorrow and loss. There's a moment for laughing and a moment for enjoying yourself. But there's also a moment for recognizing that the human situation can be very difficult and dangerous indeed. And although you, as it says, you wake up with a sense of being forlorn, nevertheless you wake up on the following morning a sadder and a wiser man. That's very much what Coleridge seems to be intimating here. This story changes us. It makes us sadder, but it makes us much more aware of the world around us. And consequently, it makes us adult.